safe in your hands. So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they a government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio!
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere,
everyone.
I just started feeling
15,
uncomfortable.
Joanna Hart,
Then it got worse, and I started
hope you're coming
perspiring.
in live
I tried to
and
ignore it, but I
live and
waited too
clear. You
long.
can hear my
The chest
parrots in
pain
the
came as we were
background.
driving to the hospital
Christine's
emergency.
Joanna Hart show,
I felt
and
my
I've
life
got a really
clock
fantastic
begin to
guest
tick. I
coming on, so I'm
barely
just going to bring
survived.
him on
There was
now.
lots of damage done to my heart.
If I can.
What do I do now? I was lucky.
It's all very
I took a
hit and miss,
leap of
isn't it?
faith
But
and
here's
tried
my
a
guest. Now, let's
7-herb
see if I can
formula
bring him
with
on.
hawthorn,
Very
garlic,
exciting
cayenne,
guest.
and
So
more,
let's see if I can
called
bring him on
Extendivite. Herbs have
without-
been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or
Oh,
visit
hi, John. Can you hear me loud and clear?
I can.
Oh, great. I'm just waiting for the credits to
The
stop rolling.
opinions expressed
because
on this radio
it's
station,
odd. Now
its
we're at
programs,
Think
and its
America.
website
They're
by the
playing
hosts,
their,
guests, and call-in listeners or
jingles,
chatters are solely
and
the
I'm-
opinions of the original source who
I'm not
express
hearing
them.
them
They do
very
not
well over
necessarily
here, so I don't know if
represent
you
the
can hear
opinions
them.
of Revolution
No, I
Radio
don't.
and
Okay, don't
freedomslips.com
worry.
and staff or
Thank
affiliates.
you, Jerry.
You're listening
who's
to
trying come
Revolution
in.
Radio,
Best if you go, Jerry, right now, as
100%
it will
listeners
probably knock out a
radio,
call,
and
but
now
thank
we
you
return
anyway,
you to
and I'm
your
guessing you
host.
can hear me loud and clearly. So it's the Christine Joanna Hot Show coming in live from London this afternoon and broadcasting across America, and I'm gathering in America. It's morning time, so good morning everybody, and I hope everyone's had a good sleep. And I've a really exciting guest today who I found completely by accident listening to one of his lectures on YouTube, and he is actually, I didn't even look up your bio, John. Sorry, you're clearly a biblical scholar. But what would you call yourself?
I'm an Old Testament professor.
Oh, sorry. Oh God, it's so rude of me, isn't it? Yeah.
Not at all.
Wow, that's really impressive, isn't it? Gosh. How did you start off? What made you? Because surely you weren't a young boy that sort of said to yourself, "I know, I'll be an Old Testament professor."
No, it's a fairly long story. I grew up in a Christian home, and when I was about 13, felt called into the ministry. But when I was 16, that was not a good idea at all. Went to college expecting to go into law, and in college found Jesus and gave my life to him. And then went to theological seminary after college, and while there, felt a very clear call into teaching. And I happened to be taking Hebrew at the time and loved it. And so it was natural for me to say, okay, I'll teach Old Testament. And that was the beginning of the story.
Oh, right. And then you, what did you do to become an Old Testament? I mean, how much studying did?
Well, I did 3 different degrees: a Master of Arts, a Master of Theology, and a PhD in Old Testament.
Wow, oh, that's amazing. And I found your lecture by accident. And my own story was a kind of, I grew up in a Catholic home, and the Catholics, I don't know if you know, but they really squeeze the spirituality out of everything, and which was what I was struck by your lectures. Is you're not just learned, you've got a lot of not just passion, you've got a lot of spirituality, and you kind of bring that into your lectures, that sort of supernatural side that I think people have got hunger for right now, because we've all woken up and we're all like, and we're hungry. And I think it's left it open for a lot of this new age stuff to come in. And I was listening to Miles Johnson last night. He got hold of some UFO person who was talking about how they were abducted, and then she started talking about how we're the gods, and I thought, oh no,
yes.
They do, yeah. They've got a massive agenda, and then they start talking about creation and she and this, and there's no mention of God at all. They're dying to say that creation is feminine. That seems to be an agenda. And,
yes.
Yeah. And I don't know why that is. Perhaps you can explain it. And no God's left out. And David Icke, I met David Icke last summer, and he's, starts saying how Jesus didn't really exist, and, how Jesus didn't really exist. He doesn't talk about God. And these people are leading these people that have,
yes.
woken up. And it's quite dangerous, it seems to me. What's your opinion on that?
Oh, I definitely agree with you. I think what's happening is that in the 19th century, we really managed to get rid of any spiritual reality. We thought the world is simply electromechanical, and everything is physical and material. And of course, that's not true. Even the pagans understood that there is a spiritual component to the cosmos. They didn't get it right, but they understood that. And we now, in the emptiness of our material culture, are slowly rediscovering what the ancients knew, that there is a spiritual component, and we're trying desperately to create a spiritual component, and we're using all of these crazy ideas to try to fill that emptiness in our lives.
Why do you think there's an agenda to say that God is feminine, or creation, as they put it?
Well, I've said to students for many years that really there are only 2 worldviews, the biblical one and the other one. The biblical worldview is God is not this world. This world is not the sum total of reality. The other view is the very opposite. No, this cosmos is all there is. Therefore, the spiritual component in here has to look like us. And so if the spiritual component, if the physical component is male and female, then the spiritual component has to be too. And so this whole idea of looking for something in reality that is nurturing, that is kind, that is caring, where did we all come from? We all came from a feminine womb. So The same must be true in the spiritual realm. We all come from a feminine womb. That's creating God in the image of this cosmos.
Oh, I see. That's why it is. That's interesting, because I was adopted and dumped by my mother. So I'm like, no, it's not
Yes.
feminine.
Yes.
I see feminine as negative, and I do. So
I can understand that.
Yeah.
But that's really what's going on, is that okay, we admit there is a spiritual realm. We thought there wasn't, but there is. So what does it look like? Well, it must look like our world.
That's interesting, because David Icke, he goes on about that kind of thing, and if he mentions God at all,
Yes.
and they're all about lighting up the self and becoming stronger.
Exactly. The spiritual realm becomes one more way of self-aggrandizing, that more way of justifying what we all want to believe, that I am the center of the world.
Yeah, and these people as well, and David, I'm not knocking him, but they talk about this, and then in the same breath, they say how the elite are Satanists, the elite are Satanists, the elite, that's the big thing. This one's a Satanist, that one's a Satanist. But surely the epitome of Satanism is to say we are the gods, that.
Exactly. Absolutely.
That is Satanism 101, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. It is whether Paradise Lost has it exactly right or not, still there is that sense that better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. That myself is everything, and I'm going to do whatever I have to build up myself.
Yeah, that's it. And they're very into building up themselves,
Oh, yes.
as well as these gurus, there's so many of them, as well as calling everyone Satanist. They're busy building up themselves, which is satanic in itself. I mean,
yes, and the terrible irony, and this is of course the biblical paradox. You truly find yourself in giving yourself away to your Creator who loves you dearly.
But it's interesting that it's quite, I mean, in my own, I was brought up by Catholics. They were quite strict. They were my adoptive parents. And
yes.
We went to church, and church was boring because, the priests weren't giving great lectures. I mean, they weren't like yours. They weren't stimulating. They were dead and dry. And still now I go to that church, and their lecturing is dead and dry. There's no spirituality in it. And then you read and it's all done by rote, and it's all done. So it kills it. And I think a lot of people have come out of that. And,
oh, yes.
Yeah. And they think then, where is God? For me, I was looking for God, and I couldn't find God anywhere. I was almost tempted to go for Satan, because I could feel Satan for sure, whatever that is. But I think, interestingly as well, now, I was so hungry for spirituality, I went to visit serial killers, because I thought, well, they're saying they're really, really evil. And I was trying to find what's there. At least I'll meet Satan. That's something spiritual. And I came to realize that Satan isn't a individual. It's not a little angel, is it? It's not a... that's all wrong as well, isn't it? Isn't it? This is what I've learned. Tell me if I'm right here. That Satan is Shaitan, which is attacker, and it's probably us, isn't it? It's an attack on God, leaving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's the accuser who accuses us, and more seriously, accuses God. And the fascinating thing is, Satan is a liar, and so in accusing God, he accuses God of lying to us. And so it's very interesting that he projects on God what he is himself.
Oh, interesting. And is Satan us, or is it actually? Do they mean Lucifer? Or recently, I've been discovering that probably it's Baal. Is it Baal, one of the demigods that is actually who we think of as the devil?
Well, I'd have to say I'm not an expert in Satanism by choice, but I would say that from Scripture, it would be that Satan is a figure. He is a real person, and he is a person then who is active in us and using our own fallen tendencies to achieve his own agenda.
Right. Now, it can't be a person, can it? Not a human, like with a sex, a sexuality.
No. He is a created divine being.
Oh, a divine being. Now, why did God create this divine being if it was something negative? Or was it a sort of challenger? Is it that all that thing about the angel? And was the divine being an angel, or is it a god?
An angel.
Oh, it is an angel.
Yeah. And so what the historic doctrine would say is that this is an angel who refused to accept subservience to God and demanded his own right and his own way, and thus he becomes the prototype of all the rest of us.
Oh, I see. Now, is that Lucifer?
Well, there comes the problem. Lucifer comes from the Old Testament, from Isaiah chapter 14, where you have a created being who's called the King of Babylon, who is determined to sit on God's throne, and he is called the light bearer, which is what Lucifer means. John Milton picked that up and applied that name to Satan, and I suspect that in Isaiah, we're not talking about the fallen angel as much as we are talking about that principle which says self is everything, and I'm going to dethrone God from any throne he might have in my life. So I would say that I question whether Lucifer is in fact the name of Satan.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. So that guy in the Isaiah, that was a king of Babylon?
Yes, and once again, I think that's a representative figure. I think he is taking this figure and saying, here is the representative of all human arrogance that says, I will be God. And he says, okay, who's a good example of that? The King of Babylon is a good example of it.
I see. But when it mentions it in Isaiah, when they mention the words Lucifer, in what respect are they? Oh, that word means light bearer, does it?
Yes, it does.
Oh, I see.
And so, again, that's the beautiful irony. In ourselves, we have no light. We are, again, this is Isaiah, we are a lantern, and the light must come into us so that we can bear the light to the world. But we as humans cannot save ourselves, and we can't save anybody else.
Until we get the light.
Exactly.
So just going back to that king, I just want to get it straight. When Isaiah, this is the prophet Isaiah who wrote that, and he was referring to this particular king. And did that king have a name?
That's as it's easy to say. That's a great question. I believe, and one of the things I've done in my life is to write a couple of big commentaries on Isaiah, or Isaiah. I think he had in mind the Assyrian king Sargon, who was in fact the sort of the major figure in the world, who then is the only Assyrian king who was killed on the battlefield. Terrible, terrible shame. And so in that poem, in Isaiah 14, you have these wonderful contrasts between rising to the heavens and being a cast out body covered by other bodies. So it's a wonderful, wonderful picture that when we attempt to exalt ourselves to the position of God, we really make ourselves nothing. Because if I am the measure of all things, then all things are meaningless.
I see. That's interesting. So where did Isaiah get that word Lucifer? He just used it to talk about Sargon, did he? In what respect did he use it? What's the quote?
It's very possible that, again, I look forward to meeting Isaiah someday, a brilliant man. It's very possible that he is using some language from pagan rituals. You mentioned Baal. There's some reason to think that Lucifer might have been a title of Baal. We don't know that for certain, but it's the language in that section talking about the king's attempt to rise up to heaven has a lot of overtones that suggest that Isaiah is using some ritual language that the people might have been familiar with.
Oh, I see. What does it, could you read it out, that Isaiah 14 right now?
Yeah, just a moment. Okay, the whole passage is pretty long, but that particular section, how are you fallen from heaven, O shining star, son of the morning? You've been thrown down to earth, you who destroyed the nations of the world. You said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne upon God's stars. I'll preside on the mountain of the gods far away in the north. I'll climb to the highest heaven and be like the Most High. Instead, you've been brought down to the place of the dead, down to the lowest depths. Everyone there will stare at you and ask, can this be the one who shook the earth and made the kingdoms of the world tremble? Is this the one who destroyed the world and made it into a wasteland? Is this the king who demolished the world's greatest cities and had no mercy on his prisoners? And it's O shining star is the translation of Lucifer at that point.
What do you mean, translation of Lucifer? Oh, I see. That is the language you use. So he's talking about that king. He's not talking about what
Satan.
we think is yeah. Is he?
That's it's really John Milton who took this passage from Isaiah and applied it in Paradise Lost to Satan. Now, I've said in my commentary, I think in many ways, Satan is the premier example of a creature who demands equality with God. And in that sense, yes, I think this passage could apply to him, but it's not talking about him.
So now, probably we're the Satans, because aren't we demanding equality?
Oh, exactly. We are. I believe there is a capital S Satan, but each of us is a lowercase s Satan in the same way.
Yeah, for sure. Who do you believe the bigger one is? Baal? Do you think it's Baal? Because there was who was Baal? He wasn't an angel, was he?
Well, no, he's a Canaanite god. In the ancient world, from Sumer in 3000 BC to Rome in 300 AD, you've basically got one understanding of reality. This world is God, and therefore in this world are these spirits. These spirits have great power, and we need to figure out how to manipulate them. Well, they've got one sort of program. There's a high god who is sort of the grandpa. He's the king, and he's benevolent. but he's not very powerful. He has a queen. The high god is the heaven, and the queen is the earth. And these are sort of ruling broadly. But then there is a prince and a princess underneath them who are the real movers and shakers. And the names change, but the understanding of reality is the same for 3,000 years. And this prince and princess in Canaan are called Baal and Anat. And Baal is the god of the atmosphere, of the storm, of rain, all of wind, all of these things. And Baal is the real power in the world. He's the one you've really got to find a way to propitiate. He's the one you've got to figure out how to get on your side and do what you want to do. So in that sense, Baal and Satan are somewhat similar in this. I don't want to push that very far, but there are similarities there.
Right. I didn't know about this. I mean, we certainly weren't taught it.
No.
Why is that? Why aren't we taught it? I mean, it should be the basics, surely.
I would think so, yes. Really, part of it is to put the best interpretation on it. Part of it is the explosion of knowledge, and so people are going to say, well, you need to know these practical things. You can only learn so much, and so it's these practical things you need to know. You don't need to know this ancient history or all of that sort of stuff. And that's to put the best interpretation on it. I think more seriously, Satan's goal is to keep himself hidden, to keep himself behind the scenes so that people are not aware that we have an enemy who's out to get us.
Yeah, and this enemy is this. I mean, do you think it's Baal or you don't?
I think Baal is one representative of Satan himself.
Right, and why would this spirit not like us? I mean, what has he got against the human animal?
Self wants to put down anything that might, number one, usurp its place, but number two, anything that seems as though it's doing better than self is. So self wishes to consume everything that is not itself. And that's what Satan is. Satan doesn't particularly hate us. He thinks we're fools for serving the enemy, God. But what he really wants to do is to simply subvert us and get us under his control.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. And what are his goals for this earth? I mean, is he stuck here? Can't he rise higher? Or obviously he's risen higher, but maybe comes back and fro. I mean, does he actually appear here in person?
I don't think so. I mean, again, I think that's part of his agenda. He would rather remain unknown so that we don't worry about him and don't think about, and you know, he is much more than just a person. In a real sense, he is the embodiment of evil, and in that sense, he wants to remain in the background so that we're not aware of what is happening and what the challenge is to us. So that, you know, he said to Jesus, the kingdoms of the earth have been given to me, and if you will just worship me, I'll give them all to you. Well, of course, he's lying. The kingdoms of the earth belong to God, but nevertheless, that's his mode of operation, that he promises us all kinds of good things, and he is a liar.
And what's going on, like, current day on the earth? I mean, you've got a lot of violence. We've got a lot of stabbings in London. And then if you look at these ISIS videos of people cutting each other, and
oh dear, yes,
I know they're awful. Is that Baal? I mean, is that to try and feel his nature? Is it in that kind of stabby thing? Is that his nature? Or is that when he comes through us? I mean, what kind of, I'm trying to feel the quality of evil. Is it like a black hole, or is it that kind of stabby?
I think black hole is an excellent example in that it seeks to suck everything into itself. And in that sense, when light is destroyed in blackness, then these terrible selfish tendencies come out, and that's really the manifestation of self at its worst. You get in my way, I'll kill you. You do what is in opposition to me, I'll destroy you. And it's that in many ways. Again, I've said to students over the years, one of the reasons I believe the Bible is inspired is that a 5-year-old who can read can get the basic point, but there's no bottom to it. So I come back to where I was. So interesting that after Genesis 3, when humanity has fallen away from God, the very first manifestation of that is Cain and Abel, murder. And that's, you get in my way, I'll kill you. You achieve what I wanted, I'll kill you. And there it is. So that I would say that in the world today, and again, I don't want to, there's a fine line that has to be walked. Satan is a person. Satan is a reality. On the other hand, Satan is not the cause of evil. Evil is our own choice, following his example, following his temptation, believing his lies, all that sort of thing. But in the end, evil in the world is self run wild.
Like the ego.
Oh, yes, yes. I mean, that's exactly it.
And so doesn't it kind of click in with this Enki Enlil? I mean, how does that, that Sitchin stuff, and a lot of truthers went for that because they're like, oh, that makes sense, that a good, like, Enlil made us and Enki was the bad guy who tried to upgrade us. Is that just nonsense, the Sitchin stuff?
No, I think, I've often told students all my original thoughts come from C.S. Lewis. But C.S. Lewis has, you're familiar with The Great Divorce?
Yeah.
Screw Tape Letters.
Yeah, I read them years ago.
Yeah. Tremendous insights there. And one of the things Lewis says, he has the screw tape, the demons say, is, we've never been able to create anything positively evil. All we can do is take something the enemy, God, has made good and pervert it. And that, I think, is what's going on in a lot of the myths. They've taken a grain of truth and perverted it. So that, is there a good God? Yes, there is. He's not part of this world, which is where the myths go wrong.
Mm.
He's not part of this world. He transcends this world. He's other than this world. There is a good God. And somehow we have listened to lies and have become ourselves perverse. So that's true. And the myths, it'll be fun to get to heaven and take some seminars to know exactly what the process was. But there's so many of the truths that can be found in the myths that are just perverted, that are just off base enough that they lead you astray. So I would say yes, we've been created by a good God who is not part of this world, and we have become perverse as a result of believing the lies of another being who is not a God, who is not equivalent to God, who's a creation of God, but nevertheless, that has happened.
It's a shame that happened because there's been a lot of suffering. I mean,
absolutely, and again, the one of the great philosophical questions across the centuries is, okay, if God is truly good, why did he let that happen? Oh. And there's this sense in which, for me, becoming a parent really, really helped to understand that is, yes, I want my child to do what is right. I want my child to make good and wise choices. But I don't want a robot. I want another person, and so I can't make her do what is right. I can't make her. And if she perverts her way and destroys her life, I cannot step in and somehow do something that will change all that. I've simply got to suffer with her as she goes through that thing. And that's really the picture of God, a God who is not just out there saying, oh my, there they go again, killing one, oh my, there's another war, oh my. No, he's suffering with us because he is doing everything in his power to get us to see where we're headed and to change our minds, but he cannot make us do that. And that really is where at this season of the year the cross comes in. Years ago, I heard someone say, what is going on in the Garden of Gethsemane anyway? Lots of good people have faced death across the centuries with a song on their lips, with a smile. And yet here's Jesus sweating blood and saying, Father, is there any other way? What's going on? And his answer was, and I'm convinced it's the right answer, Jesus was carrying on his back the next day all the horror, all the sin, all the grief, all the tragedy of the world forever. You better believe he was sweating blood and asking if there was another way. And when the Father says, no, son, there's not another way, then he says, good enough, I'll do it. And that really is, so God is suffering with us in the horrors that we've brought upon ourselves.
Oh, I see. And yeah, it's hard to know how to, in the dog-eat-dog world, it's hard to, in this turn the other cheek business has been a bit mocked.
Yes.
I was talking to a friend of mine. She's trying to get me to be born again. I'm not sure what that means, but she's trying to go through it. And somebody had done a blog about me, a man called Graham Johnson. He'd blogged about me and said when I worked on Fleet Street, that I'd done illegal things, spying on celebrities, and called me a few names. And I was angry about it, and I thought it was envy-based, and I haven't done these things. And so I blogged about him, and I called him a phone records blagger, since he called me a, spying on the Priory blagger. And she said, no, that's just not the right way. And you won't get close to God. You've got to trust in God that, it won't affect your employment issues, and let God come in, and don't be angry. And I said, but I was angry, but I didn't write it in anger. I'm doing it to stop him doing it, because I think, well, if I do that, then it'll make him think twice about writing it about me. And I don't know. And then I went away and I thought, well, I do want God to come in, because my position is bad. We're just about to be evicted from our rented place. I'm a single mother. We're going to be homeless, jobless because of this, stuff about me online, I would say. And it's hard for me then to just turn the other cheek. However, I do want God to come in, because I've reached the bottom. I can't do anything on my own. I literally get up in the morning and I don't know what to do. So I do want God to come in, but I don't want to push God away by doing a blog about somebody. I mean, what are we supposed to do in this quite dog-eat-dog world?
Well, first of all, let me say it's sometimes too easy to give simple answers. But having said that, there is a cycle of evil that when someone does evil to me, I turn up the heat 1 degree and do evil back to them. They then turn up the heat 2 degrees and return the evil. A book that I read years ago from a journalist who had been in Lebanon and Jerusalem. He said the cycle of evil in the world is, you break my finger, I break your wrist. You break my wrist, I break your arm. You break my arm, I break your neck. You break my neck, I break your head. You break my head, I get your kids. That's the cycle of evil. It's never just on the level. Someone hurts you, you hurt them, and it's on the level. No, it's a downward cycle. And it's when in God we find grace not to return it. We take one step in breaking the cycle of evil. And that's what has to happen. Otherwise, we find ourselves more and more entangled in the world that you and I were just discussing a few minutes ago. Now, you're facing terrible hardship. And so that's why I say I don't want to give you an easy answer, but that's really what's going on. It is when we say, okay, God, I've been hurt, I've been injured. You are the source of my healing. I cannot heal myself by returning the evil. By your grace, I will not. But you've got to heal me. You've got to take care of me in this situation. So I say I'm a little reluctant to talk theoretically to you in your own situation, but that's really where it is. That's really where the turning the other cheek is not just weakness or silliness. In a real sense, it is strength. It is strength to say, no, I'm not going to keep that cycle of evil going down and down and down.
Oh, I see. So I shouldn't blog about the guy? No, I suppose.
I think not. I think not. And I think again, I don't want to mess around in your life.
No, it's okay.
But I suspect that simply telling the world, okay, this is what kind of a guy he is probably not going to help you and your situation. maybe he won't respond, but in the natural course of things, that's what happens, is that it just keeps going around and around and down and down. So I guess I'd like to say it's not that you shouldn't respond, it's that by God's grace, you don't have to. That the very, very amazing statement that the Apostle Paul makes in Romans is, don't seek vengeance, for vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And so we can go to the Lord and we can say, Lord, get him. Lord, you take care of him. But thank you that I don't have to. And so I really would want to say, no, it's not that you shouldn't. It's you don't have to.
Oh, I see. I thought it might stop him in his tracks. Like
yeah. One would hope so, but typically it doesn't.
Oh, I see. Yeah. It's difficult to know. I mean, I didn't. I was looking for God, couldn't find God. Had a kind of vision in my sleep of this giant fighting this dragon, and
cool.
Yeah, and it was like I felt a lot of love for this giant, and then as I came back to sort of wake up, I heard the name Odin, and so I started looking up Odin and thinking, is that God? I mean, I don't know. Who is Odin, is that another spiritual creature that's floating around, or is that a myth?
Odin is the Norse version of Baal. he's the executive officer god who makes things happen.
Oh, I see. Why did I see him fighting why is he fighting a dragon if he's evil?
Well, I think and again, I'm by no means a highly competent spiritual counselor. My guess is that the giant was Jesus and the dragon was evil, and that when you were beginning to wake up, the enemy of our souls stuck that name into your head because he didn't want you to recognize who the giant really is.
Really? Wow.
I think so. Because he hates the name of Jesus.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I thought, who the hell is Odin? And I went on this, I did go on a bit of a wild goose chase because I went hunting and I didn't find it. And I met this group of people who were like worshipping Odin. And I didn't feel the energy was right around them. I thought,
Yeah, that's it. But he's the Norse equivalent of Baal.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
And you see, the reason all these pagan religions basically have the same order of reality and the same figures, even with different names, is they are trying to construct the spiritual world on the pattern of this physical material world. And so they all come out the same place in the end because they all start the same place and say, well, the spiritual reality must look like this reality. So they all come out with worshiping strength, worshiping the dominant, so it's just fascinating. Sometimes people say, well, doesn't this mean that all these religions are borrowed one from another? And I would say no, it's just that they're all using the same process. Well, okay, there is a spiritual reality. What does it look like? It must look like our world. Nope, he doesn't look like our world. So if you do that, then, well, what are the gods like? Well, the gods are like us, only more so. So to use bad English, the gods are gooder than we are, but they're also badder than we are. They're just us written large. Yet you can say in the Bible, his steadfast love endures forever. Wow. There is a being beyond this world who consistently lays down his life for us? Yes. Well, that's not like us. Exactly.
So why did you say it was Jesus, the vision of a giant? Is Jesus a giant now in the spiritual world?
Yes, absolutely. Now, again, we're talking about our own limited perceptions. We're talking about comparisons. So is Jesus literally a giant? No. But is he the one who is now given all power because of his surrender of himself on the cross? And the answer is yes. He is a giant.
Oh, I see. Interesting. And I looked. A friend of mine said, he bought me a Bible and said, read it. And I hadn't read it since school. And I was trying, because I'd reached rock bottom, and I thought I need to get supernatural help here. So I needed to, find God. And I was reading it, and I couldn't find God there. And then I went back to the Old Testament, and interestingly, I was reading some stuff on magic, because in that New Age truther community, everybody's doing hexes and curses.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is rife. I mean, people have to listen.
That approach to reality says, I've got to find a way to manipulate this world to make it bless me. And the Bible says, the way you find blessing is by giving up your attempt to manipulate the world. So yeah, magic is all over the place there.
Yeah, it is.
And so what did you find in the Bible then?
Well, I got cursed out, and one time I got hexed, and I couldn't get out of bed. I was, being depressed until I swapped beds with my son one night, and I got up normally, and I thought, someone's done this curse that they told me about. And so I started studying magic, and I read a book on magic. It's called The Penguin Book of Magic. It's written by a professor, and in it he was talking about magic in the Bible, and I thought, and I understood that. You see, my mind then at that point understood it, and he read out about this God called Yahweh. Yes. And it was in Isaiah, and he said, there's bits in that and bits in it. And I suddenly saw with how he spoke to Moses, what he did with the Assyrians and how he saved the person. And I understood that God, and I thought, bang, I got it. And it was ding, ding, ding. And it was odd that I came to your lectures and you were lecturing about the same part of the Bible, because I think it's there, isn't it?
Yes. If you didn't know better, you might think there was a God who was helping you to find him.
I know it was odd that I picked up that book, and read it, and it wasn't about what I thought it was about. It was about, and I found God. And then once I did, I felt it spiritually, and then I was busy praying because I knew who I was talking to.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, it's hard. I look at people now, and I see them as the ones that don't know God, and
yes,
do. And it's a shame because, I live in London, and I would say everyone I look at doesn't know God. And everyone I look at, if I go out today, which I will, everyone I look at won't be speaking to God, and they don't know God, who God is. And they happily carrying on their lives.
And they're all, in one sense or another, looking for something, and they don't know what they're looking for. They think, okay, it's a nice house, it's a secure job, it's decent kids, it's Acapulco or something else, and they're deceived, and it's a tragedy.
Yeah, it is. It's bad for them, and You know, I mean, I was crying last night and I was thinking, you know, and I had a yearning for a huge house for a long, long time. And then when I started praying and started feeling God inside me and going up to nature and lakes and, you know, praying and it let it go. And I was looking at houses and I would look at houses and I would feel pain inside because I used to earn a lot of money, but I didn't buy a house. And so I would feel a lot of self-hatred. You should have that. You haven't got that. I want that. And so I was in pain every single day. And because I got rock bottom, I had to find God. And now I look at a house and think, well, you know, I'm middle-aged. I mean, what do I need that for? I'm not going to be here that much longer. And it's ridiculous. I'm going to end up old. I'm going to be living in one corner of that big house.
Yes.
I mean, and I'm going to get smaller and smaller and weaker. And what will it mean to me? I mean, it won't mean anything, you know?
Yes. I often refer to, I don't know whether you know the name Howard Hughes.
Yes.
Here is a man who, in his own lifetime, was the richest man in the world. He ran around with Hollywood starlets. He set several airplane speed records, built what was then and is still, I think, the second largest airplane in the world, had everything, and ended his life living in 2 rooms in a very, very posh apartment on the top of the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, and never cut his hair, never cut his fingernails. He could not give up anything. Here, in my mind, is almost the classic example of a man who is consumed with himself, and in the end, all of his money, he owned 10 or 15 different houses, and he's living in 2 rooms. And in one of the rooms is a collection of jars of his urine, which he could not give up.
John, we're just having a 3-minute break. Could you mute your mic and just grab a cup of tea?
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically autonomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday at 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 6 to 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are your hosts, Pamela
and Claire, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Featuring the Public Law Trust, Lyme disease,
and astrology. Witnessing those who harm and holding them accountable.
Guess what? No more secrets. It's about time we snap out of it. This corporate government is a house of cards, falling in on itself. The Public Law. Do no harm.
When enough close syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a civil majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us. Here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse, and I started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs,
John,
and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates.
So we were talking about how
to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100%.
I think he's the example of the emptiness of all that this world can offer us. And I think what you were saying about your own realization of the shortness of life. When we're young, it seems like it's forever. And so acquiring all these things is just so important. And suddenly life has passed us by, and all we've got are acquisitions, and they're all pretty empty.
Yeah. I think it does. You know, when we get older, it does bring it home to bear. And you see, you know, I saw a lot of people that have got a lot of riches, and they tend to think, you know, they've done it wrong, or they haven't looked for this, or, oh, I should have put effort into my career, or this or that. And really, you see, it's quite odd, because they're going to meet their maker, and they don't really give it, and even when they're old, they don't.
Yes, it's very interesting that the statistics on conversion are very, very stable. That most people, if they find God, find him in their late teens or early 20s, and from that point, the graph goes down and down and down, so that there are really very few deathbed conversions. Because if I have spent all my life living for myself, and now here I am dying, and somebody says, well, the way to eternal life is to give up yourself, I say, no, I've spent my whole life building this. And again, that's C.S. Lewis in his Great Divorce. The people who have an opportunity to choose either hell or heaven, and they choose hell because heaven would cost everything they've worked for all their lives.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I had a great friend who was a writer and filmmaker. He's quite famous, Hugh Burnett, and he had a whole obituary in the Times after he died. And he didn't believe in God at all. And it's odd that when he died, even though he'd been, a learned man and he'd done all these films for the BBC, it's like everything kind of went. I mean, I went round his house and his friend got rid of all his stuff. Now I wanted to keep bits, but this friend who'd, been left the property, he just cleared out everything, his clothes, his books. And I thought, well, he's just gone. Bang, he's just gone. And I said to a friend of mine, he's just like disappeared. And he said, well, he didn't really stand for anything. He didn't, he didn't. He was all about, I mean, God bless him, but he was all about knocking God. And it's almost, when he died, it's almost like he disappeared. There wasn't that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Yes.
He was a good man.
God endures, and we who are his enemies disappear. It's one of the great ironies is that Voltaire said within 100 years, the Bible will not exist. 50 years later, his house was the office of the French Bible Society.
Oh, wow.
God will endure.
Yeah, so that was Voltaire. So I want to ask I was lucky that I got steered to God, I think. But what about everybody else? I mean, it's hard for them. I mean, they read the Old Testament and they, I suppose they see a harsh God and a God that, a lot of people say, oh, he was harsh.
Yes.
I can see it from God's eyes point of view now, that if you get a hole, I used it as using my hamsters. Now I keep hamsters. Now, if my hamsters were to not come to the edge of the cage, not really get excited when I give them nice food, if they just ignored me, I would probably get rid of them, because I would think, well, they're not giving me any feedback. And that's probably why God, decided to wipe us out with fire and flood, because we're not really doing anything. We're just like, we're not really doing anything, are we? I can see that now.
And more than that, it's not just that we're not doing anything, we're doing the opposite of what we were made to do. Again, as you were talking about the stabbings and the killings, and that just has to break the heart of God. So it's amazing. It's not amazing that he gets upset with us. What's amazing is that he has so much patience with us.
Yeah. And of course you get, the rich and the poor. There's people starving, and there's like Sir Elton John with billions and billions, and, and
yes,
he doesn't need all that to live.
No. Yeah, I really wonder what if the world endures for a lot longer. I really wonder what the future will say about a culture that pays its entertainers and sports figures millions and billions of dollars, and what they will say about us. What was the matter with those people that they were so desperate to be entertained that they would pay millions and billions of dollars for it? Wow.
I know it's bad. I mean, these guys, these lawyers are fighting against me. They put me out on the street with my son to get money, to say I spied on them when they went in the Priory, to get more millions for Elton John and Lily Allen and all these people. I mean, it's like they would see me. They don't care, but as long as they get their celebrities.
No.
It's evil. It is. I can tell it's evil, and especially because they're men as well. And I think, well, I'm a woman, I'm softer, but they would brand me a criminal and hurt my son, just to get those millions for that. I mean, it is really. I see it's evil. I do.
Yes. Very definitely.
And then when you talk to, you talk to people and say, well, that isn't true. Where's my right of reply? They're like, well, and they come out with legalese, and you think, well, where is the kindness, and where is the, kindness? Yes. I suppose kindness is gone.
Exactly. It's yes.
So how does the average person find God in the Bible?
Well, number one, that's the place to start. It is in the Bible, and I think I've been so interested in hearing your story. I think on the one hand, God is searching for us. God really wants to be known. He wants us to know him. And yet, sometimes, as your experience, we say, well, I've been trying to find him and I can't. And I don't want to be insensitive here, but in some ways, it is our attempt to have him on our terms that keeps us from knowing him. And when I hear your story of how you have, in one sense, come to the bottom, and it's now that you are finding God, I think that's probably true. That most of us who say, "Oh, I want to know God, but I want to know him on my terms. I want to know a God who's going to do what I want, who's going to justify my lifestyle," or that sort of thing. And I think in those cases, it's not that God is hidden, but it's that our attempt to find him on our terms keeps hiding him from us. And it's really when we come to that place, when we come to the bottom, as I hear you saying you have, and we say, God, I need you on any terms. I need you on your terms. It's then that he bursts through. And again and again, when you read the stories of life stories of people, it's that kind of thing where they've come to the end of themselves and say, okay, God, I don't want you on my terms. I want you on any terms. Then boom, there he is. And where the Bible has been a closed book before, all of a sudden it opens up. And I'm just so interested in your story of finding him in the Old Testament. And that's wonderful. I'm going to use that in my classes when people talk to me about saying, well, I love the God of the New Testament, but I don't find him in the Old. I'm going to say, wait a minute, I know somebody who did. But I think
it's odd, John, because I didn't find him in the I couldn't find him, and my friend was going, read it, and I was reading it, and I was crying one night, and I was so upset because I thought, my poor son's going to be on the street, and I was crying. I was just feeling so bad, and I picked up this Bible he bought me, and I thought, I can't find, and then something in my head said, just read it. So I just flicked through, opened at Isaiah, and I was reading, and I was just bang. And I found it, and it was linked with that book, and it was amazing. And then it was odd that I found you talking about lesser gods. It was a lecture about lesser gods, and I thought, he's put it very succinctly. So then I looked at your others, and there you were talking about the very thing. That book, he's very much there. He's hiding out there in Isaiah, out there in Isaiah. Really amazing, isn't it?
It is, and it's. And that is so typical of God, that he is so creative. We want 3 steps to instant satisfaction, and God says no, it's not that way. And he is so creative in reaching different people in different ways. And so I really do believe that the first step to finding God is coming to the end of yourself and saying, God, on your terms, the way you want to do this, but I need you. And so it's in that regard that our self, and we've talked about self all the way through here, and it is the key. Our self is what blocks us from knowing him. And when, in one way or another, we come to the end, my son worked in Russia for a number of years as a missionary, and his chief co-worker was a guy who had been a Russian soldier in Afghanistan and become totally, totally disillusioned with life in general. And when he got back, he got in with the mafia and ended up in jail. And somehow in the jail, he found a Bible. And that transformed him, just changed his life completely. And on the other hand, you mentioned a dream. It's so fascinating to me, the number of Muslims who are coming to Christ because of dreams. They can't have the Bible, they can't read the Bible. So how are they going to find God? And it's God finding them. One of the stories that just has given me chills every time I think about it. A young woman had become a Christian in one of the Islamic countries, and her family was persecuting her, and she finally said, I've got to get out. And she got enough money together to get a one-way ticket to the West, and she was on her way to the airport in a taxi, and she felt just a terrific impression. You need to talk to the taxi driver about Jesus. And she said, well, I can't do that. I mean, he threw me out on the street and run over me. No, I can't do it. But the impression was just so strong. And finally she said to the driver, do you know Jesus? And he wheeled the car over to the curb, and she thought, this is it. This is it. I'm going to die. And he stopped the engine. He whirled around. He said, what do you know about Jesus? And she began to tell him. He said, well, I've met him. And she said, what? He said, yes, last night in a dream, I was crossing a river and I was drowning. And this figure in white came and reached out his hand and pulled me out of the river and onto the other side. And he got me the other side. And I said, who are you? And he said, I'm Jesus. And I woke up. Who is Jesus? And they're just multiplied stories of that kind of thing happening. So God God wants to get us, but he can't get us until we've come to the end of ourselves.
Does that mean that everybody? I think you're right, because I think if I'd have bought a house back in the day when I was earning a six-figure salary in Fleet Street, I wouldn't have looked so hard. I think I would have been a little bit. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. Who needs God?
Yes.
Everything has gone fine.
Yes.
I've got all that I want. I've got all. This has really been again, speaking about ironies, this is the irony of the West. We have all this because for centuries we were servants of Christ. We have all of this wealth, all of these riches. And now that we've gotten them, we've said, oh, good, I don't need him anymore. And here we are, and we're in the process of destroying the wonderful world that he has given us. But that's exactly it. Now that I've got your gifts, I don't need you anymore. And that's the story of Abraham. Okay. Sarah and I have always wanted our own son. Now we got him. Okay, God, we don't need you anymore. And God says, could I have your son? And in a real crisis, God didn't want Isaac. He wanted Abraham. But he wouldn't really have Abraham until Abraham came to the place of saying, God, I want you more than I want your gifts. And I think also implicit there is, and I trust you that somehow or other you'll make this up to me. The book of Hebrews says he went believing in the resurrection. Well, he had seen a 99-year-old woman get pregnant, so what would be so hard about raising the dead? But all that to say, that was a real crisis point in the revelation. Do I want God or do I want his gifts? And we in the West have said, no, we will not give you our Isaacs. We want our gifts, and we don't want the giver.
I see. Yeah, it's. I mean, I had a child late, and I was, oh, thank you God, thank you God. But then when you get on with things, you don't, you don't really pay any attention.
Yes, sorry, I've got a phone ringing here. I'll shut it off. Okay.
Yeah, you don't. Once you've got it, and I was getting on with enjoying my son.
Yes.
I forgot, but only now when I'm in a terrible position, facing on the street, which is horrible. Now I talk to God every minute of every day, and I think about God, and then I make sure I make hours to go into nature where I can't find it hard praying in concrete everywhere, into nature and look and think this is God's creation, all the animals and the birds I can hear. That's God's, it's not man, and man's a bad thing, really. Sometimes I see, because it is godless, and on my way there I see lots of them, and they don't know God at all, and it seems super ungrateful, really.
Yes.
I mean, it really does.
Yes. He's given us all that we are and have, and we don't need him. We're getting along very well, thank you. Even when our lives are a wreck, we still think we don't need him.
I know. I was interviewing a man in Lyme who had a beautiful house with a restaurant next door, gorgeous wife and grandchildren, and we were sitting in his beautiful garden, and there was a view of the sea, and we were talking. For some reason we got onto God, and he said, oh, I'm an atheist. I just felt a little bit disgusted sitting with him, because there he was, with so many blessings. And it was disgusting, really,
Yes.
To think he'd got it from all his own. He must have had. See, people have blessings, but they don't see. They think it's from their own.
That's exactly right. And to take what God has given and to think that we have produced that is the ultimate idolatry.
Oh, it is. And I knew the writer Colin Wilson as well. And Colin used to say, because I used to say, oh, your books are inspired and God wrote it through you. And he said, no, come off it. Colin Wilson wrote that. It was me.
Yes.
And it wasn't, because there were bits of it that I knew him really well, and he wasn't good enough to do that. It was inspired, some of it, and it was really good. And he didn't. But there we are. That was him. A lot of writers do get great art coming through them, and they don't give it any thanks. And
exactly. One of the again, this is St. Paul when he says that they refused to give thanks to God in chapter 1 of Romans, when he's talking about the tragedy of the world, and he says, they instinctively know that there is something beyond themselves, but they refuse to give thanks. And I think that's a very dramatic word. That no, this is mine. I did this. And no, it isn't. It's a gift.
Yes, and even people that have got really blessed lives, you don't see the gratitude. And it's kind of odd. It's like sickness. Like we take our health for granted until we fall sick, and it was like, oh, my life wasn't that bad because I had a healthy body. And it's weird. Our minds must be made like that in some kind of way. We must have something wrong with our little minds.
I think that's exactly what the Bible would say. That yes, there is this, and Martin Luther called it the incurved heart. That there is something that in us that turns everything back upon ourselves. And so he was saying that to be born again is when our heart is curved outward, and we are able to forget ourselves and to give ourselves away for the sake of others.
Oh, that's interesting. Where did he say that?
Oh my. I don't know. In one of his writings, but I don't know where it's located.
And that's Martin Luther. It's not Martin Luther King, the black.
No. It's Martin Luther. The Latin is cor incurvatus est, a heart curved in on itself.
All right. I was listening to one of your lectures last night, and you spoke about this. You said everything goes back to the heart. That's where you do your thinking, in the heart.
Yes. We think of the heart as just the seat of the affections. That's what Madison Avenue and Valentine's Day have done to us. But in the Bible, both Old and New Testament, the heart is the core of the personality. It's where you think, it's where you feel. It is where you feel, but it's also where you think and where you decide. So when the Bible says, love him with all your heart, it doesn't mean just to feel warm and affection about God. It means to love him in your choices, to love him in your thinking, as well as your feelings.
Oh, I see. And where does it say in the Bible that our heart is at the core of everything?
It really is. It runs through. So, for instance, in Proverbs, it will say, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And at other places, it will talk about where you will with your heart. So it's not in any one place. It's just all the way through, that when you really begin to investigate what does it mean when it uses the word heart, it's clear that it's much more than merely feelings.
Oh, I see. It's interesting. And how would you say, do you believe right now that it is, we're coming to the last part of our show, do you believe that we're in end times right now? Is that what Revelations actually says?
I don't know. Christians across the centuries have been able to find elements of the book of Revelation in their own experience and to say this is it. And so I'm reluctant to say, well, yes, I've loved. I grew up in the Methodist tradition, and so I've read a good deal of John Wesley, and then the American Bishop Francis Asbury. And Francis Asbury, in one of his journals, says, Father Wesley believed that Christ would come about 1812. I myself think it will be closer to 1839. And I often find that amusing. And during the Second World War, everybody was just convinced that Hitler was the Antichrist. And so if Christ returns tomorrow, I will say, yeah, I can see that the conditions in the world correspond very closely to Revelation. On the other hand, I don't know. So I hope he will come back soon. I mean, as I see the world just spiraling into disaster, and all of the possibilities for disaster that technology now is creating for us, I surely hope he will come soon.
Yeah, it's very much gone into the aggrandizement of the self. I mean, do you believe like these, the truth community is saying that the elite, the people that own the world, the corporations, the heads of them, the families, etc. Do you believe that they're out there drinking blood and being pedophiles? Do you believe that is going on?
I guess I would say I believe it's possible. As I hear more about the kinds of things that go on in the upper levels of government and the conspiracies and the I am more willing to believe that sort of thing might be going on. I'm not convinced it is going on, but if it is, I guess I would not be surprised.
Yeah, I think that these people are probably into themselves rather than into
Yes.
entities, which I suppose that would be something like Baal worship. I don't think they're
Yes.
into worshipping anyone apart from humanity
Right,
and
right.
man.
In terms of technical worship, but really to the there is no actual Hebrew word for worship. Uh, Whenever you see worship in your English Bible, almost always what the Hebrew actually says is they prostrated themselves. And so to fall down on the ground before, and I think there are a lot of people in the world who are falling down on the ground to their own will and their own self, and as a result, involved in very evil practices.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they're probably imbued with the spirit of Baal anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I hate it that you've got men not protecting women and children. You've got women, being adulterous and sort of putting themselves up as men. So all that is changed, and it's all very.
Yes, the for me the sad aspect of the world's present view of sexuality is, again, my sexuality is mine, and I can do with it whatever I please. So that it is not a real part of the way humanity is made. It is simply, it's mine, and I can do with what I want. And the whole attitude that is spreading in the West, especially, that basically, hey, there's nothing that is fixed. There's nothing that is certain. It's all up to us, and we can do whatever we want with it. And the end of that is destruction, because God says, no, I made the world to operate in certain ways. If you don't operate in those ways, you're going to hurt yourselves. And we just refuse to accept that thought. And as a result, we have these sexual tragedies that are all around us.
Yeah, it is depressing. And also, a friend of mine was saying about being born again. Now, do we have to be born again? I'm not sure I'm born again, but I know, I love God and I'm speaking to him. Does that mean I'm born again, or do I need to do something?
No, I think it's describing a changed condition, a radically changed condition. And, I'm I'm not your judge and jury, so I'm not in a position to say exactly where you are. But from my perspective, it sounds to me like you are indeed manifesting a radically changed condition where you are no longer living for yourself. You're living for God. You're no longer wanting your way. You're wanting God's way. And I think that's what we're describing. And for some people, that does mean a radical moment, a moment when suddenly the light goes on and they say, dear God, I've been living for myself and I'm headed to an eternity of living for myself that's going to be horrible. No, I accept Jesus as my Savior. I repent of my sins and I receive all of Him for myself. And that is the moment of being born again. But I think when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus in John 3, which is where this phrase comes from, he's not saying, Nicodemus, you need to have a moment. Now, it may be that he did, but what he's really saying is, you've got to have a radical change in your life. That may be a matter of months. It may be a matter of a moment. But there's got to come a point where you can say, hey, I've been changed. I am a different person than I was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 minutes ago. My orientation is no longer on myself. My orientation is on Jesus. And that's to be born again.
Oh, I see. So you don't necessarily have to have a moment. I get lost in anger. I can get really angry at people, especially.
I'm sure.
Yeah, especially men because I think men should be protective. My father was sexually abusive, so he wasn't like that. So I expect men to be, and when they're not, I feel very angry towards them, and I think I'd be happy just to see them dead in a ditch. But
that's angry, all right.
But it's not God's way. I know that. I should forgive them and see who they are. And see how they're lost. Really.
Yes, and that's a part of the process of. Again, it's a word that has fallen on very hard times, but it's a part of the process of becoming holy, of becoming like God, is to say, oh my, I feel that, but I'm not going to live there. God, here, I give you my anger. Here, I give you my feeling of lust, or I give you my pride. And the Holy Spirit is helping us to recognize those tendencies in us. And the question is not whether you feel anger. The question is what you do with it. Most people nurture the feeling and live in it. And the Christian says, yeah, you hammer your finger with a hammer, you're going to hurt. And so somebody hurts you and you're going to become angry. But the question is, okay, do I live there? Do I nurture it? Do I nurture the feeling that I've been abused? Or do I surrender it to my God who loves me? And that's the process.
And of course, the forgiveness.
Yes. And that involves compassion. To really, I had an experience like this years ago. A man said some things to me that he didn't have any reason to say, and I was hurt, I was upset, and I found myself weeks later just gnawing on that. Why'd he do that? He didn't have any right to do that. And I realized, man, this is eating me up. And I said to God, I don't want to feel this way. What do I do? He said, pray for him. I said, pray for him. Pray on him, maybe, but pray for him. And as I began to pray for that guy, Lord, bless him today. Give him a good day. Help him in his business. I began to wonder what in the world had happened to him to make him that way. What pain had he experienced? What things had been done to him? And I realized, hey, that's the key. It's compassion. It's not just saying, oh, I forgive him. I forgive him. I forgive him. No, I don't. It's Lord, I feel something of what he must feel. And in that sense, yes, I ask you to forgive him and I forgive him. So it's really forgiveness is not just a matter of gritting our teeth and saying, well, I forgive him. It's really a matter of developing the compassion to the point where we can do that.
Yes, that's a good point, isn't it? Yeah, it is. I was writing a letter to, the guy had been blogging about me today, and then I got to the point where I was thinking about why did he, and I said to him, I'm not your mother, you must have been treated really badly by her to hate me so much and reduce me. I did have some achievements in Fleet Street, and I have well-published, a Sunday Times best-selling author, and he reduced me. He called me a medical records blagger. And he reduced me to that. And I said, how dare you? But then I thought, what are my achievements? That's what God gave me. There's no need for me to fight so hard like a little feisty person. You know, I mean, dead soon. Does it really matter? You know, does it really matter? Because I got all upset, and I suppose that's my pride and ego. I will not be spoke about like that.
Yeah.
Look what I've done. But
and our real self-worth is in the fact that the Prince of the universe has given his life for me. Wow. I'm worth that? So not any of the books I've written or the lectures I've given or any of the other stuff, that's not really the source of my self-worth, because other people have written better books. Other people have given better lectures. Other people have done other things. If my self-worth is in those things, I'm in trouble. But my worth is in Jesus Christ loved me to death. Wow. I must be worth something.
Yeah. Yes, you're completely right. You're right, and there's always someone who's going to be a better writer. Or,
oh yes, yeah. And so we have to put them down. Well, okay, they're more popular than me, but really, they don't write all that well. It's just kind of an accident, and that's not the place to live.
Yeah, and then you're always looking to put someone down. Like sometimes I read a book, and if it's in my field or a field I want to be, I'm looking for the bit that's rubbish, and I'm not enjoying it. Yeah.
Yes. And that that means you're free. You're free to enjoy what's good about it, and say, well, yeah, that part's pretty bad, but hey, this stuff was good. And you're free, and that's wow, what a place to live.
It is amazingly free. I used to crave fame, and really craved it. And then one day I went to meet a journalist. It was when the phone hacking all came apart, and I had brought it about by introducing an editor to a private investigator, and I thought, well, I'll get lots and lots of fame from this, and I'll sell my book on the phone hacking, and people think, wow, I'm so interesting. And I went to meet this journalist, and he just completely ignored me. He wanted to hear about this other guy. And I thought, well, what about me? What about my part? And I came away and I thought, well, I'm going to get ignored in the whole thing. And I was supposed to be a star witness. Again, I imagined the cameras clicking me as I went to court. That didn't happen because everyone pleaded guilty. And I thought, I'm not going to be famous. I'm knocking on a bit now. I'm into middle age. I'm not going to be famous. And I sat in my car and I felt really bad. And then I thought, hang on. And I felt this amazing feeling of freedom. I don't have to fight for it anymore, or long for it. That's longing for something. And it left me. I thought, I'm just a normal person. I thought, it's so freeing. It's just so freeing.
Yes.
All our things that we want. And the presence that, the feeling that I might be penniless and going to be homeless in 2 weeks, but the feeling I have when I go up to the hill and I go to this nature reserve and I go there every day and pray is a lot more powerful than if I had a mansion and millions in the bank. It's just an amazing feeling to be connected to the supernatural and to feel it. And it's an eternal thing. I mean, when my body gets older and older, that feeling won't go. That feeling.
Exactly.
Walking with God and feeling it. Yeah, it won't go away. It will always be there. So one has to bless the fact one fell so low.
Yes. My father was a good man. He was a farmer and a factory worker and honest, and we went to church, but it was a little bit pro forma, and he was in a serious car accident and survived only barely after weeks in the hospital. And he had always prayed a set prayer of grace before meals, and he came home on a Saturday morning And at lunch that day, he prayed, and it was an extemporary prayer, and praying thanks to God for his life and that sort of thing. And afterwards, I think I was 10 years old. I asked him about it, and he said, "Well, when I was in the hospital, I had a long time to think about what matters and what doesn't matter, and I discovered that God mattered a whole lot more to me than I had thought," and that was quite a speech for him. He was fairly taciturn, and but that made a great impression on me as a child, that it was really that tragedy had brought him closer to God.
It's odd. It's odd. It works in those different ways, isn't it?
Yeah. And as I said before, God is immensely creative, that he reaches us in a variety of ways if we're willing to be reached. And I've thought a bit about when you first contacted me about finding God, and it is that interesting thing that really it's there's a song, and I will an old song. I'll not be able to remember the words exactly, but it is. I sought the Lord and found him, finding me. That yes, he was searching for me long before I was searching for him, but I had to come to that place where I could see him, where I could realize who he was. And I think that's it. As I said earlier, it's when we come to the place where we surrender ourself, where we surrender our demand that he show up on our terms, in our way, and humble ourselves, that then we discover, hey, he's been looking for me all along. And
It's interesting. I prayed to have a child, and God gave me a beautiful son, and who just looked like an angel. And as soon as I got my son, a friend said to me about loving God. You must love God above everything, above your partner, above your children. And I'm like, no. I love my son far more than God. And I lived with that, and then he got older and older, and of course children, when they get to teenagers, they're sort of like, they don't want to know you, do they? They're like,
no.
And I'm like, suddenly I'm just completely alone, and going through this hardship as well, and I'm like, oh God, and I realized then that yes, I did do that, and it's silly because everything is temporary here, and houses and partners and children as well, and but God won't ever leave us,
No. I said to someone, I knew the week when my youngest son became a teenager. We were at a camp, and when we went there, if he was 12 years old at the time, when we went there, and he and I would walk together, he would just instinctively put his hand into mine. By the end of the week, he didn't want to walk with me.
Yeah.
So I realized, okay, that part of our life together is over.
I know. It's sad. It's sad. I've been doing loads of crying over it. I mean, it's just it's like a death. It's that relationship you've had with this angel that clings to you in this most amazing way just peels away and it's gone. It's like, whoa. But I mean, but if you've got God there, you've got that warmth and you've got that on inside you, and
you're not alone.
You're not empty. There's not that emptiness.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the name of God just to finish off. Yes. Got 10 more minutes. I found, because every time anyone said God, I used to think of my parents and that. And then when I obviously found him in Isaiah, he was called Yahweh. But some people get a bit annoyed and they're like, why can't you say God? Why Yahweh all the time? And there's other names, isn't there? Like, is it El or El Shaddai? El Shaddai, are they the name? Does it matter what you call God? And can you call God El, or is that another different? Is that a wrong name, or is there many names?
Okay. First of all, El is the name of the high god in the Canaanite pantheon. He's the god of heaven. He's the grandfather that I was talking about earlier. And I think that, God is very economical. He will use anything in this world that he can, but he'll transform it. And so I think probably that Abraham called him El. Yeah, he's the high god. He's not Baal. He's not this prince who's the active one who really makes things happen. He's the great God who is over all. So I think God was willing for Abraham to use that name, El, with which he was familiar. And then to Moses, God says, now I want you to know me more intimately. I'm not just God, and that's what El is. It's a kind of a generic, which like our word God. It's not truly personal. And God says to Moses, I want you to know me on a first name basis, we could say. And my name is I Am. And I often think of Moses saying, well, yes, I know you are, but what's your name? And God says, I am. And Yahweh is a sentence name meaning he is. He exists. He is the source of all that is. He's the only being that can say that. I truly cannot say I am because I'm dependent. I'm dependent first on my parents. Well, I'm dependent first on God, but then on my parents. I didn't make myself, but God, he's the one being in the universe who can say, I am, and we can call him he is. And so, yeah, I think it's very appropriate. Now, the irony is, as the Jews went on, they became more and more, I guess the word is sanctimonious, and they said, oh, we don't want to call God by his personal name. Oh, my, no. So whenever we see those four letters, we will say Lord. And to me, that's such an irony that God says, I want to be known by my name. And they say, oh, no, we want to call you Lord. And I think God has always been a little regretful of that. And so that's what comes into our English Bibles, that wherever the four letters YHWH appear, we get Lord. And personally, I think that's unfortunate. And so I think it's very appropriate to call him Yahweh. That he.
I see. Well, what about El Shaddai? What does that mean? That's not lovely.
That
name,
is El, the Almighty.
Oh.
The Almighty God. And you've got others, El Elyon, which is the Most High God. So that's where those all come from.
And do we have to, you said earlier about, Baal being the prince. Do we ignore Baal, or do we have a chat to him now and again and say, how are you? And
No, I think we don't have anything to do with him. Because again, as we said earlier, in many ways, he is one representation of Satan. And that's where, in the Old Testament, again, Baal in the Canaanite language meant Lord. And the prophet Hosea in one place says, women, you got to stop calling your husband my Baal, my Lord, because by that point it had become associated with this pagan god. And so that really right through the Old Testament is the contest between Yahweh and Baal, where the Hebrew people want to worship Baal because it seems like you can manipulate him. They had to have rain. They didn't have any big river to irrigate with, like the Nile or the Euphrates. So they had to have rain. So man, we don't get any rain this spring, we're all going to die. There's no supermarket that we can go to buy food. We got to have this rain. So, man, if it's Yahweh, we just trust him. We just pray and say, Yahweh, please, we love you. We want to serve you. Please give us rain. Well, that's scary. No, we'd rather have Baal, because we can manipulate Baal. We can give him certain sacrifices. We can do certain rituals, and Baal will have to supply rain. That's a lot more comfortable. And so that's the contest. Are you going to have a God of this world that you can manipulate and make serve you? Or are you going to have a God who is not this world, that you cannot manipulate and you simply have to trust? Most of us would prefer the God we can manipulate and think we can make do our will.
Yeah.
So no, we ought not to mess with Baal.
Oh, I see. Well, that's really interesting. Thank you. That's answered my question. That's answered my question. Fascinating. Oh, well, you've been a great guest. We've just got 2 more minutes or so left before they cut in with the music, which does come upon us quite strongly. So I'd just like to thank you for coming on the show. It's been great. I've really enjoyed my education there and my spiritual counseling.
Thank you. I'm so glad to get to know you and get to know your story. And I pray that God will indeed provide your needs in these next 2 weeks.
Thank you. I appreciate that prayer, and I do. Thank you. So where do people get hold of you? Because your lectures tend to be dotted all over the place, don't they? I mean, they're on one channel and then the other, and
they show up. They show up everywhere. People have put. I haven't done any of that, but people have just put them on. I have a website. The website is one word: calledtobeholy. .net.
Excellent.
And so they put an audio message of mine on there every week. I have a friend who manages it for me. And then every week I put on a short devotional that people can, if they wish, subscribe to, and it will show up on their email automatically.
Oh, excellent. That's brilliant. So I'll put the links under the show when I put it up on YouTube, which will be soon. And of course, I'll get you the MP3. And if you've taped this yourself, John, feel free to do what you wish with it, to put it up somewhere. Or
welcome to Revolution Radio, where
that's lovely. And thank you very much. I can hear the music now, although we can't hear
Revolution Radio,
playing over it. I think a little bit. God bless, John, and thank you very much.
And information each and every day.
Bye.
Revolution Radio never sleeps. Revolution Radio is worldwide and borderless information. Revolution Radio is also commercial free. Revolution Radio is supported 100% by you, the listeners. And that's why we appeal to you to donate and support this station and its expenses. You can support us in many available options like archive subscriptions, our seed pack selections, or even my woodworking store. And we also even have Revolution Radio's swag at the Revolution Radio Zazzle store, which you can get t-shirts, coffee cups, even a baby onesie. Or you can just plain donate to the cause. We cannot continue without your support, and your support is what helps pay the bills. So please, if you wish us to continue, please stop by our station support page and drop a dime on us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.